I don't know what I was expecting when I started up Dredge. I heard that it mixed fun fishing mechanics with eldritch horror, but that was it. And it was enough to get me hooked. Pardon the pun. It quickly grew on me though, and I slowly discovered that this is a game worth playing. It was just fun, it made me like video games again, and I was absorbed right until the moment when I saw the final cutscene. It's a good game, but what makes it great is the palpable atmosphere it built and the plethora of hidden lore just waiting to be unveiled. This game thrives on fear of the unknown, and in this video, we're going to cover every nook and cranny of it, from the troubled shores of Little Marrow, to the ancient civilization of Devil's Spine, to the indescribable horrors that lie in the deep. The game opens with a fisherman on the hunt for a job. He heads into a thick fog and crashes right at the foot of a lighthouse. You play as this fisherman and proceed to meet the mayor, who shows you the ropes. Your ship has been destroyed, but you are given a replacement one, and soon enough you're up and running, doing what you came here to do. Catch after catch, you soon come face to face with something utterly strange, your first aberration. This is the first sign that something is not right with this world, this grotesque thing that's slithering in between your hands, and it's not the last. In the horizon, you can also spot an ominous red beacon, something the locals haven't the faintest idea about. You take the distorted fish to the fishmonger, and he rips out a crimson patterned handkerchief from its insides. As you return to your boat, you're met with an individual you'll come to know as the Collector, and the events of the game are thus set into motion. Throughout the course of your journey, you collect relics similar to the handkerchief, traversing every corner of the map, encountering even more twisted aberrations along the way, and uncovering the tragic story that befell this place 20 years ago. These relics, unbeknownst to you at the time, are integral for a ritual, one that brings your wife back from the dead and summons a world-ending Cthulhu-like creature, damning the world to another age of deep. But what am I even talking about? How did we get from here to there? Why have we summoned Cthulhu, and what is up with all of these horrific abominations? Why do I feel an oppressive sensation every time the fog rolls? Why do the boats answer back? Why does the basalt speak? Why does the sky turn red? Why didn't I throw it back? Why didn't I throw it back? The world of Dredge is rife with the unexplained, things that aren't really comprehensible from the get-go. When you explore the Grey Isles, the cluster of islands the game is set in, you don't go a day without encountering some new twisted fish from hell or a stony slithering snake seeking to rend you asunder. What we do know about all of these aberrations is that they more or less have the same source, the deep. It is the force of evil haunting this world, the one that seeks to remake it in its perverted image. But when there's a yin, there's a yang, and here is the sky. It presents itself much more discreetly than the deep. Not many twisted skyfish, I'll tell you that, but it is there nonetheless, constantly at war with the deep. This is all very out there, however. How does this matter for our characters? You, the fisherman, the collector, the researcher, and all the other few remaining inhabitants of the Grey Isles. Well, we'll get to all of them in due time, but first, we'll start with one that you only managed to get a glimpse of, right at the end. In your journey, you visit 5 main areas: the Marrows, Gale Cliffs, Stellar Basin, Twisted Strand, Devil's Spine, and the Pale Reach. In every area, save for the last, you hunt for a relic from your past and return it to the Collector. In the Marrows, you find the key. In Gale Cliffs, you find the music box. In Stellar Basin, you find the ring. In Twisted Strand, you find the necklace, and in Devil's Spine, you find the pocket watch. These curios are all of paramount importance, as they are the ones that enable you to summon your wife back from the dead, Julie. Julie's story is one that you can glean very easily from these messages in a bottle you find floating around the ocean. It's frankly the most straightforward out of all the lore, since we have so much to work with. It's also the most tragic. Julie and the fisherman, who goes by Morgan, were engaged to be married. Morgan proposed to her in the center of Stellar Basin, under the scintillating lights of the aurora. A bejeweled ring was shown, and she said yes. Fast forward a month later, Julie writes about the death of Morgan's mother, mentioning the pocket watch that was bequeathed to her. She was not fond of it, but kept it nonetheless. 20th of August. They're celebrating their honeymoon, and Julie recounts the boat renaming ceremony a day prior, changed from Ocean Riches to her name, Julie. Morgan was intent on performing it correctly, lest ill fortune follow. The next day, a rock struck the front of the boat, seemingly out of nowhere. Morgan is worried he made some sort of mistake during the ceremony, and Julie comments on his sudden superstitiousness. The following month, Julie attempts to convince him of letting her dredge alongside them. She complains of boredom and thinks the idea of pulling up treasure an enticing thrill. This is where the messages take a turn for the worse. I'll just read this one in full. I have not written in a few days. I've been afflicted with some strange chill which conspires to fog my brain. I cannot seem to keep warm no matter what I do. While most of what they hauled up was junk, they eventually came up with a large wooden casket. A hush came over the crew at such a tantalizing discovery. I remember the next moment with excruciating clarity. He pried it open easily. The buckling boards cracked and groaned with relief as they splintered apart. Crimson cloth spilled out onto the deck. The crashing waves rose to fill my ears. I hear them still. He stared down into the open casket, then turned to me. In his eyes I saw the void. The next message has no date. It reads, "It feels like years since I have been warm. I do not expect him to write. I just need to know that he thinks of me from time to time. He must return. I have written him another letter. This will be the last one." And finally, the last message we received from Julie. "My darling, I found you at last. When you left, I was scattered to the winds. But now, I feel almost whole again. There's just one thing left to do. Throw me back." These messages are a bit vague, I'll admit, but what we can be fairly sure of is that they were written from beyond the grave. Julie complains of not being able to keep warm, the crashing waves rising up to her ears. She has been cast overboard, yet still she writes to her husband, worried and angry, but then, in her last message, almost at peace. As for how she was able to write posthumously, we'll get to that, as it's mentioned somewhere else in the game. One interesting detail is her mention of being scattered to the winds, since in the game, we keep seeing these gusts of wind that lead you to assorted trinkets, flags, and metal that can be dredged up. I'd like to think that this is indeed Julie's spirit, still enamored with the idea of pulling up treasure. It could be that her soul is in a sort of distilled form, where only her wants/passions are projected. But what did they haul up that fateful day? Well, she writes about a large wooden casket, and when it was pried open, crimson cloth spilled out onto the deck. I'm not sure what the cloth represents. It could be just something to protect what was inside. The Book of the Deep. This is the book that you see the collector holding, the one he reads incantations from, imbuing you with the powers of the deep. It also dictates the steps to the ritual. It's a cursed object, one that I doubt was found by pure chance. Such a book was placed at the bottom of the ocean to be discovered, Morgan chosen to be its recipient, and Julie the sacrifice needed to set the ball in motion. It should have been discarded the moment it was discovered, but alas, Morgan didn't heed his wife's warning. He should have thrown it back. At the end of the game, when you pull up the book to commence with the ritual, you see this symbol, a patterned circle in the middle, with a tear shape atop it and a tail below. This is one of the more interesting symbols to analyze, as it's very open to interpretation. We see it in a lot of other places too, on the obelisks once they light up, although without the tear, at the end of the fish species notebook included in the DLC, and even on a t-shirt available as merch. This last one is the clearest of them all, adding a tiny figure in the tier. The first thing one can notice is that these twirls inside the circle sort of resemble waves, which look very similar to the ones on the necklace Morgan gives to Julie, one of the relics. On it, the waves are on the outside, while here, they're on the inside, a reversal of the symbol, i.e. trapped by the waves. The alternate description of the necklace even supports this, saying the waves keeper now, so it's more than likely it's the intended meaning with the symbol. When asked about it, Joel, the main programmer and writer for Dredge, highlighted these aspects of the design: the figure at the tip, the central section of 5 circles, and the shear in the stem. Going off of this, I came up with my own interpretation of the symbol. I believe that it basically summarizes the bad ending. Each of the 5 circles represents a relic, each dropped into the ocean, and the counterclockwise movement shown by the waves depicts the key turning in the music box. Julia then rises from the water, shown by the little figure up top, and the veil is broken, represented by the shear in the stem. If this is the quote-unquote correct interpretation, then it's a really beautiful symbol, basically condensing the entire ritual into one image. Another interpretation given by Ultimate Ragnarok, one of the members of the Dredge wiki server, posits that the circle represents the entity we see at the end, and the broken tail at the bottom depicting it being freed. In addition, he mentions that it could be a portrayal of the conflict as a whole, between the sky and the deep, and the ritual tipping the scales in favor of the deep. There's also this symbol on another page of the book, and this one is harder to analyze. The same shape in the circle is present here, now under the water, and the swirls continue upwards towards the sky. If you think of an interpretation to any of these two symbols, feel free to write it down in the comments. I'd like to hear your thoughts. In any case, it begs the question, if this is the symbol of the deep, how come it's so personal? As in, the 5 circles coinciding with the 5 relics, and the figure in the tier with Julia being freed. Also, why are those specific items used in the ritual? Would they change if another person was sacrificed? Personally, I think yes. I reckon this curse, or whatever you want to call it, becomes tailored to the victim, and the Book of the Deep is ever so malleable with its words. It's not that the relics themselves possess any power, but their connection with the deceased and the emotional meaning they have makes them good candidates for the ritual, and so the book demands them. One of these relics also speaks of Julie, the music box. Its description reads, "A large oak box with a rusted hand crank on the side. It emits a low rhythmic chime as it rocks with the waves." This doesn't really give us much, but if you inspect the relic while on high panic, your third eye sort of opens up a bit, and the description changes to this. "A delicate music box. The handle spins freely. Inside, she's still humming." I'd like to believe that this is indeed Julie, or some part of her, trapped in the music box. Moreover, it takes up 6 squares in your cargo hold, arranged in this shape, the same size of every person you ferry around. It could be just a coincidence, but it would mean that the music box acts as a sort of casket for her, and when you finally go through with the ritual, she turns it in response, playing that haunting melody. One last detail pertaining to Julie appears in these 5 runes here. I thought that they must mean something, they look so elaborate, and indeed they do. We can see 3 of them in the animated trailer for the game, and in this scribble by the trader. I would have liked to decipher them myself, but it seems like one of the members of the Dredge Discord server, Jolfer, has already beaten me to the punch and figured out that they spell out the name Julie. The runes are just stylized versions of those 5 letters, but they don't exist in a vacuum, and it seems like they are part of a larger language, the one we find in the ancient civilization on Devil's Spine, which we'll cover in detail later. Around the islands, you can find 3 stone tablets, with 3 familiar letters engraved on them. If you bring these to the aforementioned trader, you receive the Fuse tablet, which is just incomprehensible glyphs this time, indicating that this script does indeed contain more than those 5 letters. You can also see them pretty prominently in the Banish spell, but only for a split second, which makes me wonder, what are these runes that spell out Morgan's deceased wife doing in this eldritch spell? Maybe she became his protector of sorts? There is the strong possibility that this was just a simple Easter egg, and not really meant to be taken as canon, since they appear in many different places with no clear connecting thread between them. The death of Julie was a catalyst for this whole story, and what makes it more tragic for me is that it seems like it was inevitable, like she was chosen to be the sacrifice to drive Morgan to madness. Like I said, it was not mere chance to put the Crimson Book into Morgan's hands. The Deep is a master puppeteer, and to understand the story more, we need to delve into its puppet, the Fisherman. The Fisherman, or Morgan as I like to call him because the former has too many syllables, is a classic representation of a lover struck with grief, who would do anything to bring his loved one back, even bring about the end of the world. But how did Morgan end up in this mess? His boat being attacked the moment he retrieves a cursed book from the bottom of the ocean seems hardly a coincidence, and it most likely isn't. Morgan was chosen for this role. He was particularly obsessed with getting the boat renaming ritual exactly right, a clear sign of superstition, and I believe that this very fact is what led the Deep to choose him as its point of influence. It deemed him the perfect candidate to manipulate into enacting the ritual. Now, if the Deep is capable of all of that, why doesn't it rise of its own accord? Well, I don't think it's very powerful in the state we see it in the game, as in it's held back and can only influence the world in little ways, relying on whomever it can get its hands on to do its dirty work, so to speak. Morgan might not be the first to fall victim to its machinations, and he definitely won't be the last. When you start the game, you don't know the true significance of the relics, and you just hunt for them because the collector asks you to, and because he promised rewards in ways beyond all imagining. As you bring him each one though, a little bit of the sinister truth gets revealed, and right at the end of the game, you discover his true identity. He is but your reflection, a split personality, a figment of your imagination. You have been compelled to carry out all of these steps for someone who doesn't even exist. Your mind has been corrupted by that damned book, the one that you have held with you all those years, the one you can see at the very start of the game, tucked away in the corner, along with the spectacles you wear. This twist really got me. It came completely out of left field, but made sense with all the clues scattered about. like the mayor mentioning that no one has lived in Blackstone Isle for many years, the courier telling us it doesn't have a post address, and the moment where the trader almost seems to recognize us, but doesn't. The interesting thing is, it's not really cut and dry that the collector is just something Morgan created. It's rather more likely that it's another creation of the deep. While he always appears in reflective surfaces, like the mirror and the porthole window, he does stuff that wouldn't be possible if he were just a reflection. When you ask him for the book he holds in his hands, he turns around and grabs a random one off the shelf, acting sly. He turns his back towards you, something that wouldn't be possible if he was, well, a reflection. His pose is also different in the image compared to Morgan's. At the end of the game, you also get this line: "The relics are coming with us. We should wait for the fog to thicken. With luck, the seas will remain unaware of our intentions." Now, our destination is the open expanse to the west of Greater Marrow. It's marked on the map. We must not tarry on the open waters, not with such a significant cargo. Make haste! His shape disappears from the mirror. A chill rises in your body as you turn to leave. The collector is with you. I think this is pretty damning evidence for him existing independent of the reflection world, since if he can cease to exist in the mirror, he wasn't a reflection to begin with. Though if his shape disappears, what remains in its stead? The true reflection of Morgan? In another variation of the ending, if you don't learn of the truth and break the mirror, this line is replaced with "the collector is aboard your vessel." In this variation, he's more concrete, at least in Morgan's mind, but it kind of reveals that he's not completely fictitious, if he doesn't even disappear completely in the other variation, since even when presented with the truth, the collector is still alive in Morgan's mind. I'm not 100% sure on this, but regardless of the true nature of the collector, it can't be denied that the fisherman's mind is indeed addled, and there are two possibilities as to how he developed these symptoms, the amnesia and split personalities. It could of course be a result of the trauma he endured, the sudden loss of his wife, which made him create this new character to rid himself of all those memories and thoughts, or that the influence of the Book of the Deep, the one he pored over for years, caused him to be this way. He could have also straight up used the book for this purpose, to make him forget the pain. A line from the collector supports this as well. "You wanted to forget, begged me." The room bristles. "This is what you asked for." Then again, this doesn't really mention the book specifically, and he could have just spiraled out of control. The book's contents indirectly turning him mad. And to add more confusion to the matter, you can still see a room in the house with the lights on, despite the fact that no one has been living in Blackstone Isle for years. It ranks pretty low when it comes to the freaky shit that happens in this game, but it can be easily explained by the fact that this island is strongly connected to the deep. The basalt pillars that line it stretch down to the deepest layer, and it's strongly imbued with the magic that pervades the rest of the world. This light really isn't a figment of our imagination, as the lighthouse keeper notices it as well. "I'm watching a natural glow flicker through those windows. Whatever you've got planned, I hope you know what you're doing out there." So that's yet another clue pointing to the collector being a creation of the deep, along with the fact that when the glass shatters, we can see the classic chromatic aberration so closely tied with the other anomalies we see in the game, as well as this strange eyeball that protrudes from the side of his face. It doesn't make sense for it to be a reflection of something, and I really think it sort of represents how we literally shattered him, his face being cut and inside spewing forth on the mirror. The collector was a really cool character for me. He was well written and seemed all-knowing without being pretentious, and his motives weren't all that clear, mainly because of the ambiguity of who he's really loyal to. Does he want to resurrect Julie, or is he working for his true master, the Deep, leading Morgan to perform the ritual to free Cthulhu? It speaks to the helplessness of this entire situation because Morgan is being manipulated through and through. It would take a Herculean effort to refuse all these advances made by the Deep, to realize the gravity of the situation, and to let his dear Julie go. Which makes me think, does Morgan do what the collector requests because of the promised rewards, or does he just subconsciously know that these relics will resurrect Julie? Perhaps the Deep just wants to keep him in the dark after all. I don't think he truly understands the grave consequences of his actions. Now that we've covered the main characters in our story, let's delve deeper into its main antagonist, visiting a couple of characters, monsters, and landmarks along the way. We don't really know what the Deep is. Alright, next section. Kidding. But it really is something that the game just likes to throw hints at its nature, but never really confirms anything. Same with the sky. We can deduce this from the Fisherman's Note, a most polarizing document. It reads, deep, sky, deep, forever. Casket seal broken, fog core, 5 equals rise. He knows. We can glean from this note that the world has been experiencing a cycle of deep and sky since time immemorial, and will continue to do so forever. We also get mention of the fog rising as a result of the casket seal being broken, the one that Morgan dredged up, and the 5 relics that caused the deity to rise. We also have this enigmatic line at the end, he knows. I have no idea who he is, nor, as a matter of fact, who wrote this note, but there are a couple of theories. It could be a past fisherman who came to this knowledge through the Book of the Deep, or maybe it was Morgan before his mind went completely haywire. As for the he and he knows, I'm saddened to say that I don't have a clue to that either, even after the many hours I've mulled this lore over. It could be the Collector, or Morgan when he lived on that island, but I'm not sure. If you do have an idea, feel free to leave it in the comments. We find this note later in the game, but the fog mentioned in it is something we're warned of almost immediately. If you dare to venture into it, you'll be met with many unknowable threats. Swirling red mists that increase your panic, extremely fast sharks trying to bite your ship off, or a boat seen in the distance that seems normal at first glance but sheds its disguise when light is shown on it, revealing itself to be a horrifying anglerfish, which also tries to eat you whole. I didn't learn of these phenomena until I beat the game, because I was too much of a wuss to travel at night. What's interesting though is that these sightings are a mix of your sanity dropping to dangerous levels, causing you to see things, as well as the curse caused by the deep materializing them. The former is very similar to another phenomenon we came across, the relics changing description when viewed under panic. It seems like panic in this world attunes you to its weirdness and reveals the truth of things. And this is a recurring theme in the game, and appears very clearly with these basalt obelisks you can spot throughout the Grey Isles, looking very conspicuous indeed. If you interact with one of them, the game prompts you with this. The stone hums quietly, sending ripples through the air around it. Faint shapes dance upon its surface, vanishing before your eyes can focus on them. You can place your hand on it, and it says, the cold stone does not respond to your touch. I thought that I would get something later in the game that would let me interpret its secrets, but my strong aversion to anything aberrant has kept me in the dark, and if you reach sufficiently high panic, the obelisks light up with a crimson hue, allowing you to learn more about the world. One of these in particular describes the birth of all the aberrations you see. It reads, blackness. A crimson rift opens in the void. Breathful silhouettes drift through in a procession of teeth and tentacles. After the last grotesque figure emerges, a membrane spreads over the fissure. A distant groan emanates from the space beyond. We can pinpoint exactly when the events of this obelisk took place, when the Book of the Deep was dredged up. It allowed the veil between the deep world and our world to be perforated, and that membrane is the world's feeble attempt to stop its continued invasion. The groan in the last line is presumably from the monster we see at the end, not yet able to pass through the rift due to its sheer size. A crimson rift opening also implies that this isn't really a physical separation, rather a dimensional one, an eldritch world seeping into ours, slowly corrupting it. Speaking of corruption, this malicious entity uses a unique way to spread it, its own blood. The dark liquid we see being mentioned in the game that courses through the veins of the apparated fish. Moreover, in the Iron Rig DLC, when we drill into the seabed, an oil erupts from the cracks. I naively assumed this was literal oil, but it's in fact a mixture of silicious ooze and the eldritch elderblood. We get a description of it from the scientist, an important character we'll analyze later. It reads, it's unlike any substance I've ever seen, touched. It's smooth one moment, silky, next sharp, stabbing. This fluid is so stereotypically evil, it sort of makes me laugh. When I first saw it, it reminded me of the black goop from Disney Epic Mickey 2, The Power of Two, an old game I played on the PS Vita. And on the spills we see, you can straight up see skulls splattered on it. Quite charming. Now, since it is blood, how is it sloshing around everywhere down in the depths of the ocean? Have we nicked an artery? It's actually quite possible because after enough drilling, a huge kraken springs from the depths. Perhaps this is the blood zoner, or at least one of them. We don't know how many gargantuan monsters reside in the deep. What's even more concerning is that the veil separating the deep and the natural world must be really thin if you could just drill into it, which also means that it might be more physical than we thought. And there's this whole realm of obscenities just lying beneath the world, with an eldritch god knocking at its door. Speaking of doors, we have the path to the door, a track that plays when you're docked at Blackstone Isle, which corroborates the fact that the isle has a strong connection to the deep. But if the isle is the path, where's the door? Well, another track plays at the end of the game, bearing that exact title, and I assume that the intended meaning is that we've opened it wide and letting the deity. It also fits neatly with the key and music box that we open, since with the turning of the lock, we also open the figurative final door. There's also this cool detail regarding the sequence of us obtaining the relics, the intended path at least, from Gale Cliffs to Stellar Basin to Twisted Strand to Devil's Spine, which makes you do a clockwise circle around where Blackstone Isle is located. However, when we throw the items for the ritual, we do so in the opposite way, counterclockwise, another reversal, harkening back to the symbol of the deep. This neat factoid was brought up by Junie Mooney, another one of the members of the Dredge wiki Discord. So we are in fact kind of turning a giant key. I strongly think this was intentional, and I love how we can notice larger patterns in the gameplay and how the events of the game guide us. This shows you just how unique of a medium video games are, since they let you do cool stuff like this. Another detail I noticed, and I'm not really sure if this is intentional, but when you use one of the spells you're given, Atrophy, it produces something that resembles a doorway with light flooding out of it. Atrophy fully depletes the closest harvest zone near you, and yields many more aberrations than if you were to fish it normally. Maybe it invokes the doorway between the deep and the normal world to extract more of its corrupting power, perhaps causing it to seep more elder blood. On a little island in Devil's Spine, there resides a crazed fanatic who possesses one of the relics you seek. When you speak with him, you can ask about a scroll, and in here, he also mentions a door.
I found it at the end of my other life. It washed ashore, as all great gifts do. It took some time for me to decipher the runes. It speaks of an incomprehensible door, and those wretched twisted fish that swam through. Their flesh is the closest thing to a key.
This sounds very familiar, doesn't it? It harkens back to that fissure you see in the Devil's Spine obelisk. I think this very fissure is the door, though if it's as comprehensible as the fanatic mentioned, I don't think it's as simple as a physical one in the seabed. His comment about their flesh being a key is also very intriguing, because it doesn't coincide with anything that we've encountered. If we take the events of the game at face value, then we open the quote-unquote door with the ritual that we do at the end, and not with any flesh, of the fish kind anyways. Julie's might be a candidate. The aberrations didn't have any role to play in that, just the relics and the book's words. We're far from done with analyzing the deep. It extends to every part of this game's lore, but we'll move on from discussing it directly and touch on its creatures, the monsters that made each of the 4 main islands their home, alongside the ones that roam the seas between. When you first approach the Grey Isles, you're warned of a hateful serpent that's been devouring the cliffs. As a part of your mission, you need to venture into its passageways, and will inevitably come head to head with it. I was terrified when I came across this beast, and my boat wasn't nearly fast enough at that point to outmaneuver it easily, so after some chasing, I eventually met my grisly end, which just so happens to be my only death in the game. Like the other creatures in the Isles, this one has a twisted origin, as it's definitely not an ordinary part of the local wildlife. One theory is that it's an aberration of the conger eel, as they appear very similar, live in the same area, and reside in Holden Rock, but an obelisk in Gale Cliffs turns this theory on its head, and implies that it was actually born of stone. It reads, "A heart of stone wrapped in a twisting tail. A serpentine body uncoils, teeth rasping at its earthen shell, larger now, bursting through the cliffs, sending rocks tumbling into the water. An eye opens to this new world." If we take this at face value, a piece of rock was transformed into that creature, presumably when the Book of the Deep was dredged up, and the rift opening ensued. This is actually when most of the aberrations began cropping up, and puts the serpent's age at around 20 years, which is exactly when the whales in the area started getting scarce. When the last one was brought in, a mass exodus began, and the inhabitants of Gale Cliffs left in droves, getting in their ships and sailing north. It seems like the serpent was the culprit, making the ecosystem unsuitable for the whales, perhaps hunting them to extinction. Now only a couple of people remain in the cliffs, left to tell its tale. The next treacherous stop on your itinerary is a quaint little resort around the Blue Hole, with pleasant tropical weather and mesmerizing water, home to many types of fish and reef. Sadly, the little shacks that make up the resort are all in disarray, and have long since been abandoned. The only inhabitant you manage to find is a poor stray dog. When I first arrived in this area, I came from the north side, and stumbled across a research outpost. I was very disoriented here. It was nighttime, and I knew that things weren't safe just by virtue of what happened in Gale Cliffs, so I was very apprehensive. As I was inspecting the outpost, I found large cracks in the laboratory's floor, and as I left, I slowly discovered their perpetrator. It was really cool discovering this gigantic creature that stretched down to the depths, flailing its tentacles around, very much intent on destroying me. I couldn't simply avoid it forever, however, since it had the relic I was looking for, but I left it for the moment. This monster is the one that interests me the most, simply because of its mysterious origin and design. I mean, look at it, the thing's ginormous. It's also very central and imposing, like it owns the place, has a role in it. Obviously it's not something of this world, but it has conquered this place completely, turned it from the relaxing resort it once was, to a lamentable landmark, and a researcher's dream. We find said researcher in an abandoned fort nearby, having fled from the outpost we visited a while back after the creature attacked it. She needs help collecting some samples of the fish in the area for some studies she's conducting. Once we deliver them to her, she provides us with some valuable insights towards the creature's nature. I have good news and bad news. Which do you want to hear first? Well, the good news is that I've honed in on what's causing the abnormalities in the ecosystem. And the bad news is that the samples you retrieved from the basin have dangerously high counts of cellular mutations. This all points to one thing. That thing in the basin is harmful to life at a cellular level. It damages everything around it, whether passively or with intent. So it appears that the stellar basin creature acts as a conduit for the deep's power, aberrating all of the surrounding fish, a sort of disciple. Though I don't think it's sentient enough for that, and it's just being used to spread the corruption. The deep spreads its influence with elder blood, that much we know, and since the creature is situated so deep down, it probably has direct access to the stuff. We know from the Iron Rig that when you dig deep enough, you'll eventually reach it. The OST track names also beautifully hint to this, going from silt to crust to basalt to mantle to blood. The interesting thing is we get a source of the corruption in Stellar Basin, but not for the other areas. For example, in Gale Cliffs, there is nothing that could act as a conduit. Maybe some spots are just stronger than others? I mean, we have Blackstone Isle, which has the strongest link to the deep as far as we know, so maybe the other islands have a similar connection. Now we shall study its origin, and for that, we have the ever-helpful and ever-mysterious obelisks. Near the Starlight Pontoon, we spot one in the distance. It has a lot of... Oh shit, my bad, that was the wrong one. Never liked these things. Robbed me of precious lore with their wiliness. Now, where was I? Ah yes, okay, this is the obelisk I was talking about. A spore floats in the water, adrift in the current. Fish feast in a frenzy above, devouring its skin. The spore lands in the thick silt of the seafloor. Its roots stretch down into the seabed, growing, extending towards what lies beneath. A sole spore survived, and grew to this behemoth. It's pretty remarkable that this isn't an octopus, squid, or anemone like the researcher guessed. Not even an animal, it turns out. Makes it all the more alien. I also just noticed that the line, what lies beneath, seems to be a sort of nudge-nudge comment, alluding to the power underneath the seabed. On the other side of the basin's edge, nestled between some huts, is another obelisk. This is a particularly mysterious one because it seems like it should be very relevant, yet it's hard to piece anything concrete from it. It reads, "The green glimmer of an aurora blooms in the night sky above the resort. A distant boom shakes the thatched roofs and rouses dreamers from their sleep. The waters withdraw, exposing the coral to the warm air. Confused creatures chitter and seek out their hiding places. Moments later, the waters return, crashing, seething, sweeping souls out to sea." My first thought upon reading this was that it describes a meteor impact, possibly one that created the blue hole. But two things. First, blue holes are not formed by meteor impacts. And second, there's nothing here to lead me to believe that it was created by a meteor. It's just me trying to look for a satisfying way to connect the dots. But this obelisk must serve a purpose in the grander canon, it can't just be irrelevant, which brings me to the rather far-fetched theory that this is indeed a meteor, and it carried upon it the spores that the stellar basin creature birthed from. Again, this one is very much just speculation on my part, but I like it because it takes from the panspermia theory, which states that life could have developed somewhere else, and brought to our Earth on a comet or asteroid. The real reason is probably more mundane though, well, as mundane as something in this universe could be, as in one of the lore videos posted on the Black Salt Games channel, this is mentioned.
In recent years, the area has suffered massive decline. Due to changes that seemed to spread from the marrows, dangerous jellyfish began to appear, and a constant deep rumbling sound made the area unpleasant to be around. Eventually abandoned by staff and the owner, the resort now remains empty.
Something similar is also stated in the video about Gale Cliffs. It seems that after the book was dredged up, its influence reached all corners of the Grey Isles, causing the islands to birth these monsters. The spore could have very well come from the marrow, riding a current directly from the point where the book was dredged up, perhaps through the Crimson Fissure. In any case, I like this obelisk because of its vagueness. It means that whoever created these in the first place didn't really care to spell everything out. And come to think of it, how did they arise in the first place? Well, what do you know, we have an obelisk to show us just that. Dark rocks erupt from the earth, piercing through buildings and trees, through sand and crashing waves, through the basalt pillars of this island. The newborn structures crackle with an unknown energy, crimson lighting arcing between them. The earth shifts once more, and the stones lie still. So, while this gives us some information, it doesn't really explain who spawned them. We can safely assume that they also sprung up alongside the Crimson Book, but that's about it. In all honesty, whatever explanation that might exist could just be hand-waved away by the fact that the devs wanted to spread some lore bits here and there, and this is a sufficiently mysterious way to do it. If I'd have to give a real answer, then they are probably the thoughts of the deep itself. Where flesh made it through the fissure, its thoughts did as well. In these obelisks, we get visions of pasts and futures of every single kind, and it seemed like the deep was somehow there in every moment, except for the one where Greater Marrow burns, as that sort of represents what it wishes would happen. In any case, we shall now have to bid the beautiful stellar basin goodbye and make the voyage to the murky, twisted strands. The fog grew thicker when I arrived on my boat, and I instantly knew this area would not be for the faint of heart. You can barely see, and you need some pretty strong lights to traverse it. I went to buy some from the traveling merchant, who conveniently set up shop nearby. After a quick purchase, we talk, and she says something quite ominous. Something about the place seemed off. Through the fog, it looked like the trees were moving. I can't explain it. I turned around and sailed right back out. I really like it when we get hints about a place's nature before we get to explore it ourselves. You tend to form all these ideas about what they meant and how to best tackle the place, and if there's a need to be careful or just inquisitive. In my case, I bravely ventured into the lagoon and immediately noticed a peculiar looking contraption, probably meant to entrap something. As I'm wondering what that thing could be, I hear a disturbing creak. I was not sure what to do here, but I definitely remember getting the hell out of Dodge until I got the courage to visit again, which was the next day. My second encounter went much more smoothly, as, while I was stricken with fear, the monster just slowly dipped back into the water, and I was free to drift deeper into the maze-like structure of this place. After some dead ends, I came across the airman, who has already seen the horrors in his doorstep, and was more than happy, or sad really as all his squadmates are dead, to tell us about the so-called mind suckers.
Devilish creatures through and through. They'll stalk you along the waterways and emerge suddenly, screeching their terrible song. The first time it happened to me, I saw shadows of my squadmates reaching out to me in a feverish dream. When I finally snapped out of it, I was covered in bloodied scratches that must have sent me running through the foliage. Since then, I've done my best to avoid the fiends. Their senses seem to be based on movement, so move carefully.
The airman isn't our only source of info on these creatures, and in a southern part of the Strand, we come across a familiar structure. If you interact with it, you get this vision. A parasite burrows into a large snake-like carcass. It feeds, growing fat and multiplying. Tendrils sprout from the head of the body and sense the water around it. The host corpse shudders reluctantly. With a cry that resounds through the forest, it rises once again. So it is merely a reanimated corpse by some parasite of the deep. It's really cool when you learn of this, because when you closely examine the monster, you can see exactly where and how the parasite tore its flesh apart, growing tendrils and yellow pustules, turning the original creature downright unrecognizable. It's interesting that the parasite isn't controlling a living host, rather mainly using the corpse as fuel to grow. It loses some of that aspect of control, but remains terrifying nonetheless. If you ignore the airman's warnings and move while the mindsucker has peeked from underneath the water, then it will live up to its name and do this. The way this creature attacks is one of the strangest things in the game for me. It doesn't swing at us directly, or spill acid, or anything like that, but it increases our panic, which in turn causes the vines to attack us. It adds this other step that's like nothing I've seen before. I don't know what to make of it really, because I'm not sure if these vines are even real. I mean, if panic is something that's within us, within our mind, then how does it have any effect on the physical world, the real world, within the game? Unless the creatures were always there, and our panicked state just lets us see the world as it really is. This characteristic also kind of makes the monster sort of weak, as it has to rely on other factors to do its damage, but that's a whole nother can of worms. Twisted Strands has one last tragic tale to tell us, found in yet another obelisk. It reads: A man flees through the trees, bloodshot eyes wide with terror. He runs into a dead end, cornered by the murky waters and his pursuer. He turns. A wooden spear flies and finds its mark. The first thing I thought when reading this was that the man running was somehow affected by the mindsuckers and has turned crazy, the pursuer making sure he doesn't hurt anyone else. But it seems like this obelisk tells a different story. A line by the airman I didn't mention earlier gives us a hint as to what most likely transpired.
The boys called them mind suckers. On account of them, affecting the mind. They made us see things. Do things.
This, along with what he said earlier about having dreams concerning his squad mates and running through the foliage, all points to an obvious conclusion. It was the airmen who murdered his crewmates, spurred on by the mindsuckers, driven insane by their song. And what do we see and hear the airmen doing? That's right, sharpening a spear. The same spear mentioned in the obelisk. If this is true, then I don't think he fully realizes it, or else he wouldn't be trying to honor his friends with dog tags. He would just be batshit insane, because killing a squad mate would drive him a little bit nuts, and he seems more or less sane when you meet him. He does say that they made him do things, but he probably doesn't realize the full extent of that. In any case, I really like this little story being told here. It's just vague enough to not be confirmed outright, but also provides us enough hints to string a complete narrative, which reflects the entire game's way of storytelling really. It's just the right amount of vague where you can have your own interpretation, but still fall into a sense of right and wrong. After we've aided the airmen with annihilating the appalling mindsuckers, which is the only monster we're able to kill by the way, though you could argue that the parasite still lives on after the fact, he finds the necklace in the remains of the last one we take out, and hands it to us. With that, we can leave this wretched place behind, and navigate to the last landmark on our trip, with perhaps the most dramatic name yet, Devil's Spine. The sky turns a bright orange as we approach the archipelago. An ancient white temple can be made out in the distance. Upon docking, we can inspect some stone columns, which have 3 carvings for us to examine. They read: The carving shows a swarm of small fish surrounding a boat, the ravenous children. Alone, they are nothing. Together, they summon her. Beneath these words, somebody has added a crudely scratched note. Do not let them grip you. Burn them away. Another carving now? The carving is of a large fish with crossed out eyes, the unseen mother. When the starving cannot eat, she approaches. Beneath these words, somebody added a note. Blind but can hear her children. Avoid at all costs. And lastly, the carving shows a bubbling underwater vent, the breath of salvation. It burns those that mean harm. Only the pure remain. And the note? Protection. Follow the magma. Find them. These pillars, along with the crudely written notes, succinctly summarize the monster that inhabits this area, along with how to avoid it. Once you undock and explore Devil's Spine proper, you quickly meet the aforementioned ravenous children. I just hate the sound that they make. It's so wicked, like they're a bunch of devilish little children mocking you. The more that gather, the slower your boat gets, and if 6 of them attach themselves on it, your engines are effectively gone, and only the default speed remains, leaving you very susceptible to the thing they're calling out for, the unseen mother. The only way to escape at this point is with the use of Banish, which sends the piranha swimming and allows you a brief moment to escape. You can also go over the underwater vents, at which point they'll be scalded if they attempt to follow you. What's really remarkable about the Unseen Mother is that unlike the 3 other monsters we've seen so far, she was always here. She wasn't brought to this world as a result of the Book of the Deep, because we see her description inscribed on the pillars, and those are ancient, like way before the book stretching up, and way before this age even, so she must be really old. I wonder why that's the case. Maybe she is an aberration, but from the previous Dark Age that has persisted for so long. Also, why is she unseeing? I don't think she was born like that, so it could be that the denizens of the ancient civilization sort of maimed her to make her weaker, and less of a threat, and perhaps she evolved with time, and turned her children into her eyes. Her description being on the pillar could suggest that she was always like this, but we really have no confirmation on that. The inscriptions could have been done after the fact, if she wasn't even always blind. She could have also been blinded by the sun, as she's a deep creature and her being above water is encroaching on the sky's domain. But that's about it for the Unseen Mother and the 4 main monsters as a whole. We'll move on now to the other minor ones that can be spotted in the Grey Isles, some real and some less so. In the Marrows, when night falls, you can spot these ships roaming around in the distance. I remember clearly when I saw them for the first time. I was confused at first, then scared. What were those ships doing at night, following the same path over and over again? I never dared to approach them because why would I? The safety of the lighthouse is right there. I chalked them up to being the souls of the fishermen who died at sea and moved on with my day. Well, if you for some reason approach one, or are just not careful where you go, they reveal their true form. There isn't much to say about this one, just that it's a pretty cool enemy, an anglerfish taken to the extreme. The model is also very similar to our boat, which makes it spookier. Now, if magical anglerfish weren't enough for you, there are also literal ghost ships, one of them looking very similar to the anglerfish boat. We'll talk about the paranormal right after we finish with the aberrant, as there are other enemies that, much like the vines in Twisted Strand, only spawn when your panic level is high enough. And they are crows that flock around your boat and annoyingly nab fish from it, using Banish or the foghorn drives them away, a horrifying purple manta ray looking creature that was the only one that I encountered naturally in game. I was just doing my own thing, taking in the view, and I see this goofy ass thing trying to bite my boat off. Gives me the heebie-jeebies. A tentacle that tries to crush your boat in half, probably belonging to a giant squid much further down. A phantom shark that charges you at Mach 1. This one wasn't particularly scary because I would dodge it effortlessly with haste. It became a minigame of sorts after a while. Not a creature this time, but an evil waterspout that chases you relentlessly until it makes contact with your ship. They have a chance to drop an aberration on it when they do, and I got the 3-headed cod. Neat. And lastly, the Gleaming Goliath. Remember the skull-laden oil spills I mentioned earlier? If you're panicked while entering them, this monstrosity will emerge, and will keep chasing you until you're in its gooey maw. If you somehow manage to evade it, then you'll get an achievement, which is how we know its name. It also has eyes all over its body, a recurring theme throughout the game, but more importantly, present in another monster we see, the one that attacks the Iron Rig. This kraken-like creature has eyeballs riddling its tentacles, and while it's not gooey like the Goliath, it could be of the same spawn, because they're the only 2 creatures that clearly boast this theme. Speaking of this monster, what was its deal? It's never really expanded upon, just comes in, attacks the rig, and gets chased off. I wonder if it was part of the creature we see at the end, one of its tentacles making their way through the barrier, but I doubt it. They don't seem nearly as large as the ones we see at the end. It could be its own monster entirely. I don't think the deep has a shortage of those. So those are the creatures that pop up when your panic is high. But oh, we're still not done yet. We still have the apparitions that pop up every now and then, and there are a lot. Ghost ships, ghost pirate ships, ghost houses scattered around Gale Cliffs and other places, ghost islands, ghost freighters, and ghost docks. Varied and plenty as these are, I never encountered a single one while playing, mainly because you need your panic to be above 0, and I was very careful not to let it reach that point. An apparition that I definitely wouldn't have seen is an inconspicuous shadow behind Greater Marrow that appears randomly at night if your panic is high. The shadow of a woman, holding an umbrella and a bag of some kind. This is our Julie, waiting for that picnic with her husband Morgan. I wonder if this is just his mind hallucinating her, or it's an actual creation of the deep. But I think I've wondered that around 5 times in this video, and at this point even I feel insane. We're finally done with the monsters of this game, save for a couple we'll talk about later. Yeah, I know, there's a lot of stuff in this one. It's now time for us to discuss the old inhabitants of this world, and the place they called home. This region is in such stark contrast to all the other areas we visit. It's far removed from the little houses, shacks, and stone fortress we see. Not foreign architecture, mind you. Stuff like this exists on Earth. I mean, it was inspired by it, but definitely very, very old. One could even say ancient. I like this area because it gives me that classic experience of uncovering the history of a fallen civilization, trying to decipher vague symbols, reading archaic inscriptions, and slowly stringing a story of what happened to the place, why it fell into ruin. We can find the traveling salesman on L5 at the foot of the spine. What she's doing here, I have no idea, not much business to be found. When asked about the place, she has this to say. Some kind of ancient civilization must have lived here, judging by the state of the buildings. Things didn't go so well for them. I can't imagine they built all this around an active volcano, so the volcano must have become active sometime after they founded the city. I'd guess that the volcano caused them to leave, or wipe them out, one way or another. All in all, it's a pretty inhospitable place. I'm not really sure why I come here. I was quite bummed when I read this. At first glance, it seemed like this culture had quite a bit of history, and to be wiped out like that is a tragedy. If we explore around the many drowned buildings and pillars, we can spot a lot of very familiar iconography. Wide open eyes etched onto every column and archway, a whole slew of statues of robed people, either carrying a goblet or raising their arms to the sky, possibly in prayer or in fear. There's also a shrine bearing a similar carving, the U of Julie. If you'll remember, a recurring theme with the aberrant in this world is that if you truly wish to understand it, you must be correctly attuned to it, and that entails raising your panic to a sufficient level. Only then will you see the inanimate statues gain those reddish eyes, following you around. You can also find ones that have their bowls ablaze with a red flame. Before we can move on to the rest of the spine, we have to deal with this kooky guy, the Fanatic. I glossed over him earlier, but he's actually a really interesting character. When you first meet him, it's apparent that he's down the deep end, literally. He's a follower of the deep, and immediately places you on trial to see if you're fit to be Herald of the Purge. Then sends you on a fetch quest for 3 fathomless flames, needed to light the 3 statues on the temple. We actually get a reference to this guy in another part of the game, albeit not outright. In Ingfell, a town in Gale Cliffs, you can talk to one of the residents, and if you ask her if she knows any odd characters around here, she says this.
Have you heard the tale of Magrin? He was an old whaler from these parts. As the whales got more scarce, the crews spent longer and longer at sea trying to find them. Magrin, it seems, wasn't cut out for this. He formed an unnatural attachment to a scroll he found on one of these trips. He says the scroll told him how to become immortal, by eating mutated fish. People started calling him Magrin the Fisherman. One day, the town awoke to find all the boats, nets, and lines had been slashed in the night, and old Magrin was nowhere to be found, nor has he been seen since.
And here he stands before us, speaking of fathomless flames and waving around that cursed scroll. If you take a look at his right arm, he has what appears to be scales, so a transformation has already begun. His eyes also have that classic chromatic aberration, displaying his descent into madness, and possibly his ability to observe the anomalies we ourselves see when we're panicked, as it's similar to this eye symbol that appears when you're at maximum panic. This leads me neatly to my next point, when the Fanatic says this.
The nearby spires blaze with eternal fire, yet the stone hearths of these 3 idols lie barren and void.
He was obviously referring to these statues, which is a neat little detail confirming our suspicions. Or is it? This point actually kind of drove me mad, because these are actually not spires. This is a spire, and this is a spire. This is a statue. But it's the only thing that I found that actually carried a flame. The only other thing that could possibly be what he's referring to are these shrines, which you get the fathomless flames from. But, and you can make this observation quite easily, they are far from being spires. They're just shrines. And the Fanatic even refers to them as such. They don't even carry flames, they just have a miniature version of the miasma we see normally when the fog rolls around. So what could Magrin be referring to? Where are these elusive spires? Well, I've compiled a few theories. The first is that he's referring to spires that once existed, and he's just delusional enough to think that they're still standing. Basically, he's a loon, and he says loony things. Possible. Second theory is that he's using the term spire quite loosely, and he actually means the volcanoes scattered around the archipelago. The main one in the center, and the little ones that cause the bubbling vents. It's kind of far-fetched, I'll admit, but the eruption was how the deep took control over Devil's Spine, so it has some plausibility. And the final one, which I think is the most plausible, is that he somehow refers to the dilapidated lighthouse. Bear with me here. The only other place where Spire is mentioned in the context of Devil's Spine is in a track name, titled The Spire's Fall. Now this refers to the lighthouse, a roundabout way of saying it, yes, but it makes sense. A lighthouse is just a shiny spire. The connection doesn't end here, however, because within this lighthouse we find none other but the flame of the sky, which is described as such. Impossibly bright for such a compact design, the delicately faceted crystal lens focuses a perpetual shimmering flame. That's just eternal fire worded differently, which is what the fanatic says. And yes, you'd be right to point out that he does mention many spires, and lit ones on top of that. But this is literally the best that I can do. I have no idea what damn spires this maniac is talking about. For all we know, his mind is completely gone from all the aberrated fish he consumed. If you have any idea what was actually meant by spires, then please let me know down in the comments below. Moving along now, we can actually delve deeper into this decrepit lighthouse and dock at its entrance. Here, we can go into a cave or the ancient lighthouse itself. If we choose the former, we get to see two paintings on the walls. The first one depicts the birth of a civilization. A great beacon of light is shown repelling a tentacled figure emerging from the sea, and the second shows the fall of a civilization. A volcanic eruption tears through a tall lighthouse. Monstrous shapes devour people as buildings turn into ruin. These paintings describe how the civilization of Devil's Spine came to be, and how they eventually succumbed to the horrors of the deep. The beacon of light is obviously the lighthouse, and it plays a crucial part in dispelling the deep's powers, along with a certain creature that I'm saving for later. When the eruption felled the lighthouse, it removed the spine's ability to protect itself, and they suffered the same fate we get in the bad ending. Though in the description, we don't get a specific mention of a large tentacled figure/creature, just monstrous shapes devouring people. So it's got me wondering whether the one they dispelled in the first painting is the same one we see at the end, because while we know that this world experiences a cycle of sky and deep, we can't really say for sure whether it's the same players every time. It would be kind of amusing if the deity did rise in Devil's Spine case, then when the Sky Age somehow rolled around, he's scurried back into his dimension using the tiny Crimson Rift, though that's just speculation on my part. One thing I'm confused about, or rather just question, is how a beacon of light is able to repel a monster, one that could be as gargantuan as the one we see at the end. Seems like either it has a stupidly weak point, or the lighthouse's light is special in some way. Anyways, after climbing the many steps to the lighthouse, you're met with a solid stone door, which has no handle but instead a large socket that's suspiciously tablet-shaped. The key to this door is scattered in fragments around Devil's Spine, the stone tablets that I mentioned earlier. If you collect 3 of them, you can go to the trader, who tells you he actually has a 4th and combines the rest to form the fused tablet. He then meticulously transcribes the runes upon it and reads you its translation. When the sky mistakes the stars and the air grows thick with night, the deep will open its scars. Protect us, O guiding light. This poem is probably my favorite bit of writing in the game. I can just imagine one of the scribes of the ancient civilization etching it down, or maybe it was a group effort, I don't know. They obviously were very in tune to the world around them, and knew how the cycle worked and how to protect themselves. They probably learnt it from the tales of the people before them, and here's us, reading what they have recorded, and witnessing the aftermath of their demise. My favorite line is, when the sky mistakes the stars. It brings up a recurring theme in the game, that of stars. Scars is also a neat detail because it implies that they healed from a previous injury, and that this isn't the first time they opened, once again calling back to the cycle. When you return to the lighthouse to insert this tablet into the socket, you receive the aforementioned flame of the sky. My question is, was the fused tablet broken and thrown into the ocean as a failsafe to protect this flame, or was it broken because of the calamity? I'm not really sure, but I'm leaning more towards the latter. I don't think they would have had much more reason to protect it if they knew the end was nigh, unless they thought about the following generations. What I'm more curious about is how this object came into their possession in the first place. Did they create it, or was it given to them by the sky somehow? I really wish I could give you the answers to these questions, but I just don't have them. Saying anything else would just be conjecture at this point. What I can say though is that the ancient civilization has one more trick up its sleeve, which is the fact that they have 2 different things going on. We have the deep iconography, statues of cultists whose eyes light up when panicked, eye-themed decoration everywhere and so on, but we also have the flame of the sky, and the fact that they relied on their lighthouse to protect them from the deep's monsters. So what's happening here? Well, it's safe to assume that there were 2 factions in Devil's Spine, one that worshipped the sky and one that worshipped the deep, and they both existed at different points in time. The theory is that the denizens of Devil's Spine worshipped the sky for the longest time, but at some point they were corrupted by the power given to them by the deep, and switched their allegiance. The one thing that is kinda iffy is why we don't find anything that represented the previous culture, that of the sky. Well, it could be that they gave the entire place a makeover after turning to the deep, and that's what we see in the game. What I'm sure of though is that this turning point couldn't have been when the eruption took place, as I don't think that they would have been able to construct all these statues and etch all those eyes when the apocalypse was in action. Though, what do I know? Perhaps they struck a deal with the all-powerful deity. As you can see, truly cracking the code to the Devil's Spine ancient civilization is not an easy task, but I hope that I've at least shed some light on its lore and all the interesting bits that I care to cover. Something that you might have noticed is that these statues bear a lot of similarities to some quirky characters we see spread about in the Grey Isles, though in color. I'm talking of course about the hooded figures, the flesh-eating, snazzy-dressed, creepy cultists of old. They request specific fish from you and in return give you a book. These cover all sorts of topics, from haggling and bartering to advanced fishing and nautical engineering. Which begs the question, why? Why do these people have books on such modern topics? The real reason is for gameplay purposes, of course, but I'd like to think that they were fishermen themselves, and need some sort of hobby while they sit starving silently waiting for a lone fisherman to do their bidding. Whilst everyone else seems to be clueless of these people's existence, or maybe they just actively ignore it, old trusty Magrin actually talks about them. When you ask him if there are others that share his belief, he says this.
There are pretenders, failures that make a mockery of the deep. I tried correcting their ways, but I soon saw that they had lost the path. I left them to their ceaseless hunger.
It's clear that these hooded figures are more lost/corrupt than the fanatic. They speak in short and broken phrases and let themselves starve, stranded on various islands. They have chosen a different path of following the deep, and they have probably consumed a lot of aberrated fish. I actually wanted to say that they were given immortality through this because of the recurring theme we see going on, but in fact, in a previous build of the game, the hooded figures could actually die if you didn't feed them fast enough, and that was only changed because a lot complained about the mechanic, so I wouldn't be too quick to assume that they're immortal. What we can assume though is that they're followers of the same cult that existed in the ancient civilization's time, and have passed their beliefs down through the years. To be honest, I don't find the men in robes all that interesting. They just seem like people who have been consumed by an eldritch power and just lie there, starving uselessly. However, one of these hooded figures is intriguing, and you find him chilling on an ice sheet in the middle of nowhere. I'll just read his interaction in full. You approach a hooded figure. They seem to be frozen to the spot, pale robes frosted over with a heavy rime.
Fisherman, the ice.
You hear their jaw snap shut again from the cold.
The ice takes foam.
The hooded figure withdraws a scroll from their robes and unfurls it to reveal a drawing of a corrupted fish, an aberrated ice fish. The hooded figure places the fish on the ice at their feet, kicking loose snow over to cover it.
The stars leave the sky.
Another scroll, another twisted shape. Images of aberrated sea stars cover the paper. The sea stars are arranged in a circle on the ground. Moments later, a sinewy heel stomps down through each of them.
Fall to the deep.
A final scroll, this one stained in patches by some dark liquid. In the center, the shape of an aberrated stargazer appears from the page. The figure places the body of the stargazer in the center of the crushed sea stars. They angle its cratered eye to the sky. Attention still fixed on the gruesome pile of fish in front of it, the hooded figure gestures to a book on a nearby rock. Your payment. As you leave, the figure is still focused on the grim fish, adjusting its position, waiting, adjusting, over and over. Instead of just consuming the fish or staring at them like the others do, he's actively looking for something in the sky. As for what it is, I haven't the faintest idea. But it's interesting to note that his behavior is quite different from the others. The place we find him on, the Pale Reach, has a complete other story going on, but it seems like it's from another age. This hooded figure could be from a previous cycle, and thus his behavior is distinct from the others. He follows older doctrines. The book you get from him is also quite different to the others, a book of astral symbols. The description cites illegible pages filled with unfamiliar constellations, hieroglyphs of stars and astral shapes. Seems like this guy's pretty obsessed with stars, and seeks to find some sort of meaning within them. When the skies mistake the stars, eh? The other figures also mention the sky falling and raising the deep. Maybe he's looking for some way to accelerate that process. Study the sky, study the enemy, and perhaps find a weakness to aid his master. And with that, our foray into all things Devil's Spine is concluded, and we're free to move on to other ventures, like the multitude of fish in the game and their creator, the big bad himself, Cthulhu. There's a whole host of fish in this game, 230 to be exact, and for a fishing game, we sure haven't talked about a lot of them in this video. But fear not, or actually do, some of these are straight up nightmare fuel. We'll go over the ones that give us hints towards the lore, and the ones that I thought looked cool / were interesting, starting with the host organisms. There are a total of 8 fish that seem to be hosts for something growing within them. The most blatant of these is the host eel. It's completely withered except for its ribcage, where these red glowing shapes are moving about. Another creature, the brood squid, has very similar characteristics. Its description reads: tentacles sprout from a glowing core inside a gelatinous sac. Other cores lay dormant alongside. In these two examples, you can't really make out what's inside them. Probably just some mere magical microbes. However, in the bulbous toothfish, a faint shadow can be seen that sort of resembles a tentacled creature. This doesn't immediately call out to anything in the game, nothing that I know of, so I'm not sure what it could be. It looks like it's in the first stages of development though, so who knows how big it'll be at the end. To end the sickly green theme we got going on, we have the scouring bass, which has these gigantic green orbs for eyes. Nothing directly states that it's being held hostage by parasites, but visually it's very similar to the others. What's more interesting though is that while looking at its wiki page, the trivia section mentioned that its large eyes make it resemble the marine hatchetfish, and in my morbid curiosity, I looked it up and got jump scared with this abomination of nature. Why does it look like that? Are those nostrils? I was genuinely more scared by the real life counterparts of the in-game fish. Nature cannot be beat. The other possessed creatures we have are the cyclopean flounder with an egg for a pupil, the malignant pincer, consumed by a substance that fights for control over its claw, the sanguine shark with a direct mention of a host, the sacs of fluid growing on it containing parasites, eventually falling off and seeking another organism to feed on, and finally, the pale grasper, which has the semblance of a host. The sac in the middle and the ones adorning its head make it seem like it has also yielded control to something else. So, what do we take from this? Well, the one striking thing is that the deep doesn't have a single way of corrupting. While these parasite-infested fish have some similarities, they still vary in method, shape, and color, from the bright green of the bulbous toothfish and teal of the malignant pincer, to the black ichor of the sanguine shark and the purple sac of the pale grasper. It makes me wonder if it's really one force at play here that caused all of these aberrations. If so, why does it work in so many different ways? Does it just corrupt the DNA of creatures and seize what monstrosities arise from it? Who really knows? Next up, we have the 3 zombie fish I could find, which show that the deep can keep dead things alive, or at least reanimate them. The decaying blackmouth is atrophied, its muscles decayed, and it's a reference to the very real zombie salmon phenomenon, which occurs when salmon swim upstream to spawn, and their immune system is suppressed, which causes their bodies to rot alive. Yeah. The flayed mackerel and consumed grouper are more dead than alive though. There are 4 fish that give more insight on the deep and their connection to it. The first one, Void Eye, is the one that made me notice this pattern. Its description reads: inside its eye, a perpetual pattern repeats. Red cyclones meld through shimmering green swirls. The abyss burns through you. I think this is directly referenced in the sky. The red cyclones representing the deep and the green swirls of the sky, cycling in a perpetual pattern. It's pretty funny that the fish in this game can range from just being weird spawn of hell that the artists drummed up, or something that expands on the lore. Crown of Nadir is another one of those fish. Its description reads: a fractal gateway, reaching beyond the abyss. From its maw whispers a call from below. It seems like this fish actually has a direct connection to the deep. Its name has the word nadir, which is an astronomical term meaning the lowest point directly below the observer, say on a sphere. The mention of fractal is also important, as it kind of hints towards the deep being different to our spaces. It could perhaps even be non-Euclidean. And lastly, if that fish wasn't enough of a portal for you, we have the Vortex Interloper. And I mean, look at it, that will send you straight to Cthulhu himself. The description also mentions an unseen dimension, and it's safe to assume that this is where the deep lies. These fish presumably act as gateways to the deep, but are they attempts from it to exude more influence in the world? Perhaps they are its way of connecting more with our dimension. Who knows? And now for the sky-related fish. the ones we're not completely sure if they're of the deep or of the sky. The first one, though, is straight up confirmed to not be a deep aberration, though. The radiant squid. Its description reads, "A beacon from the depths below, a glimpse of a new sky." This is our main concrete proof that the sky also corrupts the wildlife. Our second is this fish, whose skin has literally been burned to the point of bubbling. The charred sunfish also falls close behind. You can probably figure out now that where the deep's corrupting power is elderblood, the sky is the light, or more specifically, the sun's light. We even have a fish that's part skeleton, part aurora, a phenomenon directly caused by the sun. Finally, we have the astral icefish, which I cannot in good faith attribute to the deep, because its theme is stars, something that the deep seeks to nullify. This design is also one of my favorites. You could argue that some of these fish are just creatively corrupted deep creatures, but then again, we have no way of knowing, so it's all up for debate. Next up, we have two fish that caught me by surprise when I first saw them, the abyssal gar and the giant dragonfish. All of the non-aberrated fish in this game are based on real-world creatures, be they from an ancient era or now. But these ones are taken from the adventures of Beeb, the inventor of the bathysphere, this incredible contraption here. They are among ones that he claimed he saw when he dove with it, but despite multiple follow-up expeditions, they weren't seen again, so are just assumed to be hoaxes or that Deep imagined them. I actually discovered this story about a year ago, and it motivated me to start work on an Iron Lung-inspired game, which I ended up making a video about. Sadly, the project went nowhere, and I stopped because of multiple reasons. I would still like to continue work on it though, so let me know if that piqued your interest. Before we move on to the fish I found fascinating, we have the primordial shadow. Its description reads, "Whispering purple plates orbit and lock around the shadowy core. Shapes of darkness fill the spaces between." I think this one resembles the plates that separate and make way for the elder blood to seep through when the iron rig drills into the seafloor. This fish appears with that DLC too, so I'm pretty sure the imagery is intentional. Alrighty, I'll now go through the ones I purely found interesting in a speedy manner. A fast fanatical fish flaunt, if you will. Here goes. Ruptured Vessel is a Hollow Knight reference. The sturgeon has a lower sell value because Black Salt Games wanted to dissuade people from overfishing protected species. Anchovy King is a reference to a rat king, when rats get their tails intertwined by some means or other. Only female anglerfish exist in the game, since you can't catch any male ones. The bursting anglerfish is a clear reference to the xenomorph in Alien. Defaced skate is not very defaced, that visage haunts me to my very core. The Tollymonstrum is the best thing I've ever seen, and I had the joy of discovering this fish actually existed in real life. I thought it was just another twisted creation from the minds of the devs. The wreckfish spawns exclusively near shipwrecks, just like real life, which is cool. The Crown of Thorns is a pest, and it has the worst sell value in the game. It also takes up 9 spaces, not letting you catch more useful crabs. The moonfish is also known as the Opa, the only known fully warm-blooded fish in the world, which is awesome as hell. The riddled flounder is a trypophobic nightmare that I was extremely upset to find out actually existed in real life, in the form of this demented frog. Apparently this thing gives birth to its tadpoles through its holes. Disgusting. And kind of cool. I actually saw this image first before seeing the aberration, and I fully thought it was real, like no questions asked. Shout out to Eduardo, the artist, for creating it. Amazing execution. The effigy crab is just awesome. Skull and spine make for a chilling home. The real-life counterpart to this creature, the Solacina, has the species name Solacina Cthulhu. Talk about being on the nose. Biblically accurate fish. The 3-headed cod bounced on my boat through a waterspout, something I'll remember for a while, and I like this line it has in its description. "One fate bound to many." Makes you feel some pity when you look into the eyes of this fish. This other cod that sees through a larger being's eyes, they don't look human, so it makes you think what they could be. Speaking of human features, this is a theme that's widespread throughout the aberrated fish, and I'm pretty sure it's like that because of how easy you could make something messed up just by adding human features where they're not supposed to be. The axial matron, is the xenomorph's imitator, still creepy in its own right. Inverted husk is the word disgusting if it were embodied into a barely fish-like creature. The enthralled stonefish is another one of those hosts we talked about, which I didn't mention in that section because this seemed more normal to me somehow. Like it's just an octopus that's made the skull of a fish its home, and not something supernatural. Though, who am I to say? This one's just awful, in a good way. It's messed up beyond repair. I hate how the eyes seem to have grown from the wrist area. Ugh. The blood snapper and nightwing catfish are one of the more aesthetically pleasing aberrations. And finally, Famine's End, whose description and art are equally awesome. If I see this in real life, I think I'll die of fear before I get ripped to bits with one of its maws. And with that, we finish our fish foray and are finally free to fathom the biggest and baddest fish of them all, Cthulhu. Now, his name isn't really Cthulhu, it's just what I choose to call him because he doesn't really have a name in game. I've seen him be called many things: the deity, the creature, the elder, whatever floats your boat. The ironic thing is, as colossal as this creature is, we don't really have anything on him. I mean, he appears for a few moments at the end, and while that ending cutscene was the best thing I've seen in a while, his design and the cinematography are magnificent, it doesn't really tell us anything about the creature, except its appearance and size. We do know that it's the most powerful one we see, words taken from the dev, which implies that there could be even bigger fish out there. Another thing we know about him is that he's staved off by the lighthouses, as we've seen in the Devil's Spine section, which shows that he's not truly all-powerful. All in all, it's safe to assume that his motives are malevolent in nature, and that the fate of the world is completely screwed once he appears on board. The deep has been taking the limelight for most of the video now, so it's about time we take a look at its immortal enemy, the sky. I've been hyping up the sky for a while now, and it's time we finally discuss what it really is. There is one slight snag though. We don't really have much to go off of. The influence of the sky isn't as pronounced as the deep's, and as you saw in the fish section, little sky aberrations exist, if any. In an event that can happen randomly when you're sailing across the ocean, a tentacle juts out from the water and lingers there for a bit, before being devoured by a sperm whale. I'd like to think that this whale is acting on behalf of the sky, making sure that the deep's attempts to infiltrate are quickly thwarted. Unfortunately, we don't have any evidence that this was indeed spurred on by a mysterious entity, because this is a phenomenon that happens in real life, without any outside factors. In an old version of the game, back when the men in robes could die, you could get this line if you let the castaway starve. It reads, "On the shoreline, partially submerged in a rock pool, is the body of a man. The sun and sea have corrupted his features. It's hard to make out much more than that. With a grim reverence, you turn the wheel and continue on your way." I pointed out this line specifically because of the poignant parallel it draws between the sky and the deep, through the sun and the sea corrupting the castaway's features. We've already discussed that the sun is the sky's most powerful method of corruption, and this is yet another example. It's pretty easy to jump to the conclusion that the sky is an entity with good motives, because its opposite is just so destructive. But it seems like it isn't always a force for good, and we can't really discern its motives anyways. It's as incomprehensible as the deep. The true deep will crush you, the attention of the sky will burn you. It is what it is. You'll recall that stars is a sparsely recurring theme in the game. We see them being mentioned everywhere, in the Lighthouse tablet, the Pale Reach, by the hooded figures, and even in the OST, in a track titled The Wrong Stars. The only way a star can be wrong in my eyes if it was no longer of the sky, and instead became in the deep's control somehow. We even kind of get that in the line, "When the sky mistakes the stars." Moreover, stars appear in the night sky when the sun has set, when the power of the sky is at its weakest, and the deep is most powerful. To be honest, it's quite challenging linking the stars to the whole sky versus deep thing, because whenever they're mentioned, they're not strictly one or the other. Stars are something that's closely tied with the sky, but we also have star-themed apparitions, falling stars, astral icefish, even the creature Seer, so it's pretty convoluted. I know that the devs haven't read any Lovecraft, but I can't help but think of the connection between stars and Cthulhu, where they need to align in order for him to rise. One hooded figure says, "The stars leave the sky, fall to the deep." So this implies that the deep wishes to take control of them and make them its own, be the ruler of both realms. Again, let me know of your interpretations in the comments. I tried to provide the facts and whatever theories I could come up with / collate, but I sadly can't cover everything. And this game's lore isn't going to be solved with this video, as much as I'd really like it to be. In short, the sky is to me as intimidating as the deep. Although it represents a reality that's much better than the latter provides, it's still something unknown and incomprehensible. And unlike the deep, we don't really have a mascot for it, something that we can visualize and attribute it to. Well, apart from one thing we'll get to now. In the grand scheme of things, though, it plays its role perfectly as the antithesis of the deep, and makes this world richer and easier to understand. It's two sides vying for control, a yin and a yang, forever in battle. If you've been watching this video and have already played the game or are familiar with it, you've probably been wondering where a certain creature is, one that threatens to devour you whole if you so much as think of leaving the Grey Isles. He's the sky's biggest ambassador, both figuratively and literally, and he strikes fear into the heart of those unlucky to spot him in open waters. I'm talking of course about the Leviathan. first time you're likely to hear of this creature is in this interaction with a courier docked at a nearby island. Drenched in fright, he speaks of a huge Leviathan lurking in the deep waters, mouth agape, ready to swallow his boat whole. He only barely managed to escape by, bolting to the shallows. We then offer to deliver the package he carries ourselves to a little marrow. The item is damp, very sticky, and dark fluid oozes from one corner. Before departing, the courier imparts on us that he can hear the faintest of whispers coming from it. It's clear that there is something very sinister about this package, and it most definitely contains some sort of aberration, something that the Leviathan didn't want getting into the wrong hands, or anyone's hands for that matter. It attacks anyone who manages to acquire any of the Deep's creations, and seeks to destroy it. The Leviathan doesn't care that it's taken out an innocent life in the process, just that the aberration be destroyed. You could call this an act for the greater good, but it reflects the sky's attitude towards the world quite nicely. I was personally confused at this whole interaction, because I never met the Leviathan in open waters myself, and I was always carrying a buttload of aberrations. Well, it turns out that he very much does roam the seas. I was just lucky enough to never encounter him. You also need to be at high panic, and you know how I was regarding that. From this, we can assume that the Leviathan is some sort of protector, acting on behalf of the sky. We don't even have to assume, and can take this as fact because of the sheer boatload of evidence we have. If you go out of bounds and try to explore outside of the Grey Isles, you get this warning, telling you to go back, and if you don't heed it, the Leviathan pays you a visit to make sure you follow it, or die in the process. The reason it does this is because, well, it's because of gameplay purposes, so you don't hit the end of the map. But it ties in really well to the lore and the agreed upon theory that the Leviathan eats you up to make sure that the Book of the Deep, which is in your possession, does not reach the mainland, and its eldritch power remain confined to the Isles. When I first did this, the Leviathan started circling around me, and I thought that there were two of them because of how huge this thing was, and deemed it impossible for it to be one single creature. Well, to my surprise, it is indeed one single entity. He's just this gargantuan because he's literally infinite. And don't take my word for it, Joel straight up confirms it. When asked about it, he says, well, you know how most creatures eventually end. This one, when it goes to end, it just doesn't. And as nonsensical as this answer is, I like it. This further intensifies just how incomprehensible this creature is, if he just breaks the laws of physics by merely existing. Eldritch horror at its finest. If you somehow fail to notice the Leviathan's existence in the examples I mentioned, then you're sure to see him in all his glory in the Iron Rig DLC. The crew complains of a large creature intercepting their ships and wrecking them, scattering the essential shipments across the ocean. They then ask for your help, and after you get the rig in tip-top condition, and in turn let them drill into the deepest reaches of the ocean bed, a large tentacled creature attacks, the one with the many eyes. Before the rig is brought down to its knees, none other than the Leviathan comes in to save the day, and forces the creature to retreat to the hell it spawned from. This is cool and all, but it makes me really question the intelligence of the Leviathan, or how it can be so aware of things. For example, it knows to chase these large freighters because of what they're abetting, so it realizes that the rig is there not to do something innocent like extract oil, but to weaken the veil between the normal world and the deep. He's also aware that you have the book, so he's definitely more intelligent than he appears to be. I mean, if this guy can be infinitely long, I'm sure he can be omniscient as well. Why not? Now, the Leviathan doesn't work alone, or else he would have saved Devil's Spine from what befell it all by himself, which is why he needs the lighthouses, and makes sure that they're all well maintained, as shown by this obelisk. A Leviathan raises its vast grey head, stretching up and up until it sits level with a bright flame cradled at the top of the ancient lighthouse. It watches the fire for a while, tilting its head and calling softly to it with a guttural song. Appearing satisfied, the beast slinks down into the water, gliding back to the depths. By the way, you might have noticed that the game refers to the Leviathan as it, while I use he. That's just because I like to personify the infinitely long, terrible guardians of the sea. Anyways, we even get confirmation of this role that the Leviathan plays from one of the titles of a Devil's Spine track, the Flame's Defender. I guess when the volcano destroyed the lighthouse, there wasn't anything that the Leviathan could do, or at the very least he was overwhelmed, which kind of contrasts the whole idea that he's this ancient powerful being, if a lighthouse going off means that all hell is loose. But maybe that just goes to show how powerful the deep is, and that each side has very specific measures to combat the other. The sky maintaining the lighthouse and using the Leviathan to stop what it can, and the deep using manipulation and trickery to get a poor fisherman to summon the deity. Finally, you get to see him in the good ending, when you decide that following some creepy ancient crimson book is not really the best idea, and you should just throw it back like everyone's been telling you, at which point the Leviathan rises from the sea and gobbles you, and consequently the book, putting a stop to the deep's shenanigans for the foreseeable future. It's also possible that the creature who attacked the boat when Julie died was the Leviathan, catching wind of the resurfacing of the Crimson Book and trying to stop them before it's too late. Then again, we don't have any evidence of that, and it could be just a deep monster sent out to take Julie. In the Dredge animated trailer, we can catch glimpses of large tentacles and the Leviathan, so it's anybody's guess really. All in all, this is an awesome depiction of an otherworldly monster. All the creatures and monsters that I've discussed here have felt very real to me, even if I don't understand them all that well. They seem to have defined goals and complex and interesting ways to attain them, and this last one doesn't even have a single line. It just speaks to the quality of the writing and environmental storytelling of the game, which is the reason I've decided to make this video in the first place. With that, we must bid our lengthy Leviathan goodbye and move on to another character that I haven't had the chance to cover till now, the scientist. The Iron Rigs research department was headed by this distinguished gentleman, and he, like the collector, is a very intriguing type indeed. I unfortunately won't analyze every facet of his character because that would make the video far too long, longer than it already is, but he does have some interesting things to offer. When asked about the dark fluid in the canisters, the Elder Blood, he says that it holds secrets, instructions, and whispers, which makes me think that this is the reason the obelisks act the way they do. The Elder Blood coursing through them is carrying the messages sent from the deep, or perhaps they themselves are a form of hardened Elder Blood, who knows. Speaking of the deep, when you encounter these little eyeball rascals in the oil spills and wish to describe them to him, you simply can't. And this really stuck out to me because it stands out so much and goes largely unexplained. Why couldn't we describe their appearance? What was stopping us? Is the deep trying to conceal itself? I'm not sure, but we have seen something resembling it before, when the fishmonger consumes the aberration and can't recall the previous day. It seems like the mind is just not strong enough to process the eldritch beings the deep produces, and tries to cast it away lest the person go mad. It's a cool moment despite the lack of explanation. Perhaps that's what makes it attractive in the first place. Anyways, back to our studious guy. When you finally deliver him the last of the prehistoric fish he requires, this happens. With shocking speed, he rushes towards the table, grabbing at the corpses. The shape that burst through the blackboard barely resembles the scientist, no longer meek and cowed, now a frightening visage of stretched skin and sharp teeth. With a sickening crunch, he bites down into the sea scorpion carcass, black liquid dripping from his mouth. His terrible head snaps up to lock eyes with yours. A feral cry rises from his lungs, forming an accusatory scream with freshly born claws pointed in your direction. With limbs overcome by frantic spasms, he stumbles towards the nearest window, slowly at first, then arriving at considerable speed. The aberrated form of the scientist crashes through the glass, diving out, beyond the deck of the platform, down, hitting the water, then disappearing into the deep. Yet another soul ravaged by the deep. It's clear that his consuming of Elder Blood and just generally being in close proximity of all this power made him turn into this mad fish monster thing. I'm just confused as to why he points accusatorily at us at the end, like it was our fault somehow. We were just respecting his depraved wishes. His story doesn't end here, however. If you fish in open waters, or near the area where he dived using aberrated bait, you have a 5% chance of catching this. It has no name, no description, and keeps glitching out like it wants to leave this reality. I thought this was already cool as all hell, but there is more. There is always more. If you are at high panic and hover over it, you get to see its true form. It reads, "In the sable depths, Elder Blood seeps through the void, each conquest of corruption weakening the veil. From host to host, it withers and wanders, climbing towards the clouding sky. Such transient flesh has no hope of enduring the true deep." This description is the most we get of a concrete rendition of what the deep is like, confirming that the veil is indeed weakening and that the deep has been encroaching on the sky's domain. We also have the words withers and wanders, which I think is meant to reflect how the deep takes hold of its hosts, whether by withering their bodies away or using them as a vessel. The clouding sky also strengthens the theory that it's trying to take hold of the sky and make it its own, where its main source of influence, the sun, is being literally smothered. Transient in the third line also means lasting for a short time, which contrasts with the permanence of the deep. The meaning that I get from this last line is that the deep sort of rejected the deep form. It did not allow it to enter its domain and sort of laughs at its feeble attempt. While the deep rises, the deep form dives and seeks answers, only to be cast away. It's kind of being nosy, for lack of a better word, and the deep does not want to be meddled with. It's safe to assume that this creature is the scientist we saw earlier. The deep form has fully whipped digits and a sort of shelled face with fins lining its back, but I'm pretty sure that the scientist we see here hasn't completely undergone his transformation, and continues to twist and change in the water until we drag him from the depths and onto our boat. And I think no matter what common sense would have us believe, he's not truly dead here. And I'll put forth my evidence for why I believe that, because it would certainly fit with a lot of what we've seen so far. Leaving the deep form for a minute, back at Ingfell, when we learn of Magran the Fisherman, we're told that he found a scroll that tells him how to become immortal by eating mutated fish, and when we meet him, his right arm is all scaly, implying that he's undergoing a transformation to immortality, possibly the same one that the scientist underwent, except the latter expedited the process by a fair bit. In the case of Magran though, it doesn't seem like he fully achieved it, because he does self-immolate at the end, so perhaps he didn't go all the way. The men in robes are also eternally starving, but unable to die, disregarding the fact for now that that is primarily a gameplay feature. In any case, who knows what they look like under those robes? Perhaps the very same as the deep form. Other characters also consume the aberrated fish, the aforementioned fishmonger and the dock worker. While the former remains sane, the latter doesn't, and just keeps staring blankly after he consumes what was in the courier's package. It's theorized that the reason for him losing it and not the fishmonger is because he ate way too much aberrated fish, and everyone's body is different and reacts differently to horrors beyond comprehension. This knowledge that eating aberrated fish yields immortality is seemingly a known thing around these parts, and these fish keep getting passed around in a sort of black market, so the townsfolk let on much less than they appear to know about the world. Back to the deep form, and why it made me theorize this in the first place. It never rots, and it's the only fish in the game that doesn't do that. Now, why would something not rot? Well, if it didn't have any reason to, if it wasn't dead in the first place. I know there are some exceptions, but, bear with me. This is pretty damning evidence in and of itself, but we have more. In this illustration in the Collector's Edition book, we see this written, seen clinging onto the legs of the rig. You might argue that something could still cling if it were dead by some means or other, but I think it's far more likely that it was still alive after diving, and that it tried to make its way back. The line we get in the encyclopedia says that transient fish has no hope of surviving the true deep, but maybe it never made it that far in the first place. There is one last thing left to mention about this creature, and that contrary to what one would expect, we can actually catch more than one of him, which doesn't make sense because there's only one scientist that does this. Ergo, there should be only one deep form. In spite of that, Joel seems to think otherwise, and has confirmed on like 2 separate occasions that this is indeed, quote, functioning as intended. So now we're left with the simple question. How? How can there be more than one? Well, a few answers come to mind. We know that the Ironhaven Corporation is probably some sort of cult too, and someone from there might have attempted this as well. The scientist even says, "So, it's really here," meaning he has heard of this from some account, and wanted to find out for himself. We also have the whole cult and men in robes shenanigans, and as mentioned, they could have gone through the same transformation. But this doesn't explain why we couldn't catch them before the scientist did it himself, and I'm really at a loss at how I can explain that. Maybe it doesn't really have an explanation, I'm not sure. Maybe the fall of the scientist awakened all the ones that were stirring in the deep and made them resurface. If you have any idea for another theory, don't hesitate to comment it below. All in all, the deep form and the scientist form a story that gives us a glimpse into what would happen if someone in this world fully gave into the deep and its influence, and puts out a warning for those who would like to follow in its stead. If it's answers to the deep's mysteries you seek, a fate akin to the scientist awaits you. I can see that this video is getting way longer than I ever intended it to be. I just really underestimated just how lore-dense this game is. As a result, I'll have to leave the Pale Reach for a follow-up video. It's not something that I really wanted to do, but if I included it in this one, I would not do it justice, so it's better for the quality of this one, as well as that. So stay tuned for the story of a captain and his crew, blinded by the promises of an incomprehensible monster, where the final battle between tooth and nail took place. Before we wrap up this video, I'd like to go over a mishmash of little points that I've gathered while researching, but couldn't neatly fit into any of the segments. A kind of mini iceberg, if you will. First up, we have more soundtrack names. The Return and the Reopening are Iron Rig tracks that add to the whole cycle motif, that this was not the first time this happened. The Listeners is another one in the same area, and I can't quite figure out what it's meant to refer to. Perhaps the creatures in the deep, listening to the thud of the Iron Rig drill. Not sure. And lastly, the Lines Between. A Devil's Spine track that could refer to the chafing between the opposing factions in the ancient civilization. The two following tracks are also called The Sect of the Deep, and most importantly, The City of the Sky, so there's a definite struggle between sides here. Next up, we have this bonkers-ass theory I found while perusing this Google Docs file provided by the Dredge wiki Discord, which states that because of this guy's pointy ears, Iron Haven's blood deals, and cult-like nature, he could be a vampire. I love this theory because it's so out there even for this game. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of cool stuff in this document, but this one was just so funny not to include. Vampires in my cosmic horror. 2 island-related factoids. First, Blackstone Isle was directly inspired by Giant's Causeway, which has those characteristic hexagonal basalt columns. I love that nature is able to produce such geometrically pleasing structures. It's truly a wonder. And second, remember those skulls in the black goop? Well, there's more in other places, like this official wallpaper that has them in the crashing waves. Very cool hidden detail. There's this symbol in the talisman you get in the supported dev button disguised as a DLC, and it's completely separate to the other iconography in the game. To me, it looks both like a bleeding, downwards looking eye and a lighthouse/beacon, but the latter wouldn't make much sense if it was of the deep. Didn't think it fit in with a larger lore, so I left it here to ponder over. Alright, pondering done. Remember when I mentioned way back that I'll get to how Julie was able to write posthumously because it's mentioned somewhere else in the game? As for how she was able to write posthumously, we'll get to that, as it's mentioned somewhere else in the game. Well, a full 1 hour and 30 minutes later, your patience is rewarded. The event I'm talking about occurred in Stellar's Basin with the researcher. We ask her of any strange things that she might have been witness to, and she tells us that she's been receiving letters from her sister among her papers and collection nuts, which shouldn't be possible because she's dead. This gives us 2 possibilities as to how we can explain this. First, this was added in to show that receiving letters from dead relatives in this world is just another random Tuesday. Or second, that Julie and the researcher's sister are one and the same. The first would be cool and unexpected, but the second wouldn't make much sense since we're her brother-in-law, and she must have seen us at least once. It has been 20 years, so there is still the likelihood that she straight up doesn't recognize us, but who knows. She also looks quite young, so the timeline doesn't neatly fit. In any case, it's a doozy to understand this, but not very integral to the lore. Still interesting. And finally, we have this supposed misprint in the collector's edition book, which instead of going from deep to sky, it goes straight to deep. This isn't the only misprint in this book, so it's safe to just take it as such, but it has massive lore implications if it was intended, as it kind of alludes to the possibility that the Age of Deep we bring about in the end would be the last. One more thing before I continue with the credits and outro, I'd like to do a bit of self-promotion and let you guys know that I've launched memberships on this channel. They're mainly a way for those interested to support my channel more directly, but they also come with a lot of neat perks, like loyalty badges that appear next to your name and comments, early access to new videos, custom emojis, and much more. It's one tier for now, for $5 a month, and I'll improve upon it right after this project's done. Anyways, back to the video. It has been a Herculean effort getting this video released, and you'll probably have noticed the long gap between this one and the last. Stuff came up, and this game's lore is just that extensive I had to make sure I was being thorough. Dredge is a game that mixes fun, engaging gameplay and a compelling story in a way that deserves to be lauded, and it gave me that push to explore Lovecraftian horror for the first time. I haven't actually read any of his work before this video. The one thing that was kind of disappointing with this game is that its NPCs are sort of empty, not really reacting to what goes around in the world and having little extra dialogue to offer, which I've been told is accurate to Lovecraft stories, but it just detracted from the experience. I guess the extensive lore made up for it. The music and UI were also things that, while I couldn't cover in the lore video, still deserve to be praised, because I adored the music in this game, one of the best soundtracks I've had the pleasure to listen to, and the UI felt very, very polished. But, after all of this runtime, what did we learn from Dredge? What message was it trying to convey? Well, I can definitely think of a few. Dredge, at its core, is a story about moving on, making that incredibly difficult choice of letting the person you've loved most go. Everyone has their own way of dealing with grief, whether it be pretending the person never existed in the first place, or remembering them in every step of your waking life. Dredge shows us what would happen if that were to mix with the otherworldly, and the dire consequences that could arise. Grieving is a natural process, but it can become destructive, whether for you or the people around you. Morgan created this entire split personality because he wanted to forget, and look where it led him. Throwing the book back is a metaphor for acceptance and for doing what's right for the world, a sacrifice for the good of all. This is the human aspect of Dredge, something that I actually didn't think about until I finished writing this video. I was too preoccupied with all the freaky creatures in the game, but it's the one that I appreciate the most. Before I sign off, I'd like to give a huge thank you to the Dredge.gg wiki and its contributors from the Dredge wiki server. They've been my main source for discerning what's real and what's fake regarding this game's lore, and whether I'm being accurate or not. I'd like to especially thank Kershu for answering literally all my questions, Ultimate Ragnarok and Juni Mooney for their insights, and Chiboygan, the admin who showed me the server in the first place. In addition to Bluey, who supplied all the dialogue for the game in a text file, which saved me a lot of time looking for it in the game myself, as well as helping me mod the game and giving me a lot of useful commands. I also want to credit Miss Scarlet Wings on Tumblr, who has some very cool articles covering every aberration in the game, as well as some monsters, that were helpful in providing a new perspective on the creatures, and helped me learn some new factoids. There's a link in the description with all the other credits and sources if you'd like to check that out. Well, I guess that's it. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I hope that you've enjoyed it, and that it's been insightful for Dredge aficionados like me. I've been Sadiglad, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.